let's go ahead and talk about the Voting Rights Act, that thing that happened. So the Voting Rights Act ostensibly was supposed to make it so that we could not discriminate against people based on race, among other things, in order to allow more people to be able to vote. There have been utilizations of this that have been very, very fucked. For instance, because we use the Electoral College, instead of letting people actually have their votes come out based on how many people are voting, because of that, depending on how you draw the districts for the people who get to put their votes in the ballot, you could have minority populations completely misrepresented. To try to counteract that, there have been people who have tried to draw district maps such that classically redlined districts that typically have a higher propensity of people of different races that aren't just white have their own districts for voting. Now, an end result of that has been the United States Supreme Court trying to say, actually, that's violation of the Voting Rights Act because you're doing something involving voting and it's racially motivated, so neener, neener, neener. So just letting you guys know, that's kind of the TLDR of what we're dealing with, but don't click off the video. We're going to cover the entire article here in a second. Jassa says John Roberts is the worst CJ in history, second most corrupt justice behind Thomas. Man, Clarence Thomas has got a lot of spotlight for that shit, though. The Supreme Court significantly narrowed a key provision in the Voting Rights Act in a 6-3 ruling on Wednesday, further eroding the impact of the landmark civil rights era law. For decades, Section 2, a provision that broadly outlawed discrimination on voting on the basis of race, has been interpreted to allow and sometimes demand the use of race-conscious data in redistricting to protect the voting power of minorities. Yeah. Duh. I'm sorry, but anybody that thinks that, like, the only opinion that should matter on anything is the fucking white people in America is very, very sad. But the court's new opinion, which split the justices along ideological lines, as usual, throws into question how exactly states can utilize race in their map-making process. This case involves a challenge to 2 majority black districts in Louisiana. Liberal groups had feared the court would fully gut the law, allowing red states to redraw maps nationwide and effectively lock the GOP control of Congress. Republicans, meanwhile, believe that considering race in drawing congressional districts is discriminatory and unconstitutional. This is the equality versus equity thing all over again. For anybody who needs a primer, equality is everybody gets treated the same. Equity is everybody gets treated the same. And we allow provisions for people who have been disenfranchised so that they don't get fucked. Because, like, if you say, oh yeah, no, let's say that the slave trade dies today, right? We're going back in time. Slave trade just died. And as a result of that, we have a bunch of people of color, a bunch of black people, who are now no longer on plantations because their previous masters do not want to pay them, so now they're homeless. And we do nothing to help them after that. Not a single fucking thing. That would be fucking insane. Because you can't argue then that, oh, well, they have all the same abilities as white people at that point. Well, yeah, hard-coded into their fucking genes because they're a human being, sure. But in terms of, like, real material processes, no. Because they don't have generational wealth like white people do at the time. They don't have land. They don't have education. They don't have anything. If we are rewinding to that exact moment. So the way you counteract that is equity. The way you account for that is equity. Harold says that would also be historically accurate. I know. That's why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because I know that's what we fucking did at the beginning. So, as a result of this, somebody can, truthfully, say that, well, you have all the same rights as white people. What's the problem? Well, the problem is there is no foundation, there is no feather fall, there is no way to get those people to catch up to society at the time. And we ultimately did that. Also, Creamy Hamster says, yep, America's cooked now. We have the government we deserve for our decades of apathy. Yeah, that's fair. I also noticed you said that in the YouTube chat. So, hi. How you doing? Liberal groups had feared that the court would fully gut the law, allowing red states to redraw the maps. Now, the gray area left by the court's rulings add further uncertainty to redistricting, which has become a pivotal tool for both parties this cycle. Yeah, the standard rule is that if the Republicans can use it as a weapon, we should too. I'm sorry, but this they go low, we go high bullshit is never, has never, will never work. What works is accepting that by escalation theory, if an opponent is introducing a tool into the conflict, then you are at the very least justified in using the same tool in that conflict. Though escalation theory technically talks about how if you keep doing this, the tools get worse and worse and harder to maintain. But I digress. The opposite is still true. If you do not at least carry the same tools as your opponent or tools of the same potency, then you are just asking to lose. The ruling in this case, Louisiana versus Calais, raises questions about whether the state's map, which currently has 2 majority black districts, will be in place for this year's midterms. Writing for the majority, Justice Samuel Alito, as always, Alito, said evidence of racial disparity in the drawing of earlier maps was too weak to justify the use of race to draw the new map. I would like to talk about the history of redlining and how hard it's been to move people out of certain racially emboldened areas, but, you know, for whatever. Said racially emboldened, but more racially embedded is what I meant. Because the Voting Rights Act did not require Louisiana to create an additional majority-minority district, no compelling interest justified the state's use of race, Alito wrote. That map is an unconstitutional gerrymander, and its use would violate the plaintiff's constitutional rights. Yeekin says, unrelated, but I'm a YouTube video watcher. I did not realize your streams are exactly like the videos. Oh, wait, did you think that when I did the zooms, like that was done in editing? Oh, no, I'm far too lazy for that. Absolutely not. Not even a little bit. I do all this live. I learned a long time ago that it is easier for me to be productive if I have every single tool that I would be using in the editing booth available when I do a thing, so that I never have to do anything in the editing booth because my memory is garbage. Because if I say something knowing that I'm going to do something in the edit and then I forget what I'm going to do, my entire production line dies. But instead, if I have everything ready to go live, there's never a point in time where my memory can get in the way of my job. I will not let my memory get in the way of my job. Alito said racial discrimination in previous maps doesn't have to be proven outright to justify using race to draw a new map, but that the past circumstances must give rise to a strong inference for racial discrimination. All 3 liberal justices joined in a dissent by Justice Elena Kagan, who read portions of her opinion aloud from the bench, a sign of profound disagreement with the majority. Under the court's new view, a state can, without legal consequence, systematically dilute minority citizens' voting power. Of course, the majority does not announce today's holding that way. Its opinion is understated, even antiseptic, Kagan wrote. But, she said, what the majority billed as mere updates actually eviscerate the law and amount to the demolition of the Voting Rights Act. Under conservative Chief Justice Roberts, the court has already curtailed many of the protections within the 60-year-old Voting Rights Act, with Section 2 being one of the few remaining. The case decided Wednesday turned on the interpretation of a change Congress made to the VRA in 1982. A Supreme Court ruling in 1980 said the statute required proof of actual racial discrimination that tinged the process in order to require changes to voting maps or election practices. Congress concluded that would make such cases almost impossible to pursue, since officials rarely admit to racial motivations. So lawmakers passed an amendment creating an effects test, allowing remedies for maps that had the effect of diluting minorities' voting power. Kagan argued Wednesday that the majority makes a nullity of the pivotal 1982 amendment signed into law by President Ronald Reagan. Alito said in a revised interpretation of Section 2 was needed in part because of the Supreme Court's 2019 ruling that the Constitution does not prohibit gerrymandering for partisan purposes. As a result, he suggested plaintiffs in voting discrimination lawsuits are now often dressing their political gerrymandering claims in racial garb. Failing to account for political considerations in redistricting can allow plaintiffs to undo a state's legitimate non-racial decisions under the banner of Section 2. Alito wrote, appearing to express concern that Democrats could use voting rights lawsuits for partisan purposes rather than to target racial discrimination. Maybe you should look at who's actually got a history of doing that. Maybe that would be a good idea. That would probably be the thing to do instead of saying that it's gonna happen a different way. Maybe look at who does that more often, because it's not the Democrats. It's not that they do it a zero amount of times. It's that the people who tend to do this corruption more are the Republicans. Said if race and politics are not disentangled and a Section 2 claim is cynically used as a tool for advancing a partisan end, the VRA's noble goal will be perverted, he wrote. Man, this reads like a Republican quoting fucking Martin Luther King, saying he wanted to not be judged by the color of the skin, but the content of his character, and then they proceed to ignore that. The High Court's decision is the culmination of a long-running battle in Louisiana over black voters' representation in Congress. The Supreme Court first heard argument in the case of March 2025, but the justices failed to issue a ruling and made the unusual decision to hear it again this term. In the October rehearing, the justices asked for broader questions around the VRA and its implementation. So, despite the fact that they'd already had shit happen with it, they were like, nah, we'll look at it again. Let's see if we can cut more out of it. That's a good idea. That's fantastic. Harold says, try not to think too much about the yikesy bit. They hand wave about their lover/mentor, but other than that, it's quite a ride. Hold on, what are we talking about there? Do you mean that tree's been taken down? I want to see the hood under his desk, because I know that it's there. This is how Alito has written for decades. Oh, Law Movie, The Pelican Brief. Gotcha. The different conversation that I was not privy to. Sorry. I oopsed. I major oopsed. Anyway, that's what's going on with the Voting Rights Act. The purpose of the Voting Rights Act was to try to make it so that it was easier for us to enfranchise previously disenfranchised voters on racial lines, and the current version of it is going to allow redistricting in such a way that we can re-disenfranchise those races again. Because America is a Christian country for the white man. And only that person. Only them. Yay! Don't you love living in this reality? Don't you love walking backwards? Don't you love recognizing that the Conservative Party doesn't actually conserve everything, but instead likes to regress on things? I think it's fun. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitt, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.